Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So it all kicked off on X last night after Riley Gaines has been following this story very closely, the story about the softball player in Minnesota who is part of a team who won the state championship. This is a male softball player who began transitioning from a very young age, I believe as early as 6, and documents have even been changed. So this person has female documentation, female identification. And it appears that this male softball player plays as a female player, is recognized as a female. But this person is male, and despite transitioning from a very early age, the advantages are still present.
That biological males are 10 to 30% stronger, faster, have better endurance, better aerobic capacity across the board.
Even if, like this child who went through the puberty blockers and takes estrogen, has been doing that since elementary school.
Again, if we defer to the studies, and I sent several to your producers, which maybe they can put on the homepage, they show that even on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, the decrease in physical performance is, quote, trivial. That's what the data says. And to give you an example, if you look at a biological male, transgender female, with grip strength, in conjunction with a biological female transgender male, okay, so both of them are on blockers and cross-sex hormones. The transgender female, the biological male's grip strength, was 17% greater than the female on testosterone and puberty blockers.
Yeah. And the female softball players have noticed these differences. They've spoken about it anonymously, albeit. And Riley Gaines was simply highlighting how unfair this situation is, that they're still allowing male athletes to compete in the girls category. They're still essentially forcing girls to compete against boys. Parents are sneaking in their boys into girls' sports, changing their birth certificates, changing their passports to the female marker, and using that identification when they go to school. And they sign up for girls' sports. They change in the locker room with girls, and they're accepted as girls for the most part, until people find out. So Riley Gaines obviously has made comments on this. She's been following the story very closely. And she noticed that Minnesota's State High School League turned off its comments on X. You can't comment under the celebrations of winning the state championship. Because obviously people are going to bombard the page saying that the win is illegitimate. The win is unfair because you have a male player on the team. Is it a coincidence that the team that happened to have a male player is the one who won the championship? So on commenting on the fact that they turned off their comments, finding it pretty amusing, Riley Gaines commented the following: "Comments off, LOL. To be expected when your star player is a boy." Then out of nowhere, Simone Biles responded with the following: "At Riley Gaines, you are truly sick. All of this campaigning because you lost a race. Straight up sore loser. You should be uplifting the trans community and perhaps finding a way to make sports inclusive, or creating a new avenue where trans feel safe in sports. Maybe a transgender category in all sports. But instead, you bully them. One thing's for sure, is no one in sports is safe with you around. Bully someone your own size, which would ironically be a male." And I find it very interesting how people stand up for the trans community. They stand up for trans-identifying males by using their identity as an insult. So I would not be surprised if she's regretting her response to Riley Gaines, her words to Riley Gaines. But at the same time, these people have no shame, so who knows? But she was bombarded with a barrage of home truths. Let's put it that way. To me, her comments told me that she has not been paying attention. She hasn't been following what's been going on at all. Number one, she's saying, why don't you talk about an open category or campaign for that? That's exactly what a lot of people who stand up for women's sports have suggested repeatedly. And even in Riley Gaines' sports, swimming, they actually introduced an open category. World Aquatics introduced an open category, and we expected Leah Thomas to show up. But guess what? Leah Thomas did not show up. No transgender athlete showed up to compete in that category. It was completely empty, not one. Even though you probably would have ended up getting a medal because you would have had to compete against yourself. They didn't show up. They're not interested in an open category. And second of all, it's not our job to find ways for them to be included. All you people who cry about, women who stand up for themselves and say, we don't like this and this is not right. All you people who cry about people stating the obvious, that yes, men are stronger than women. All the people who are upset about that, they're the ones who need to push for an open category without involving women. Leave the women and leave the girls out of it. That's what I say. To these sporting bodies who want to bend over backwards to accommodate these people, leave the girls out of it and stop experimenting with the women's category. Stop experimenting with female athletes. And you would think, as a female athlete who has reached the highest levels of accomplishments when it comes to sports, you would think, as somebody who's spoken out about SA being committed against female athletes, that she would be concerned about girls being forced to share locker rooms with boys and men. You would think she would be concerned about that.
K through 12 and women's sports, we're allowing men or boys to play in these sports. It's dangerous, it's wrong. We have boys in the locker rooms watching girls go through their get ready for practice or a match or a game. How wrong is that for a girl to have to endure something like that? What we would have called 5 or 6 years ago somebody going to jail is now acceptable in high schools and middle schools. This is absolutely wrong when a girl has to fear this, but she can't say anything.
So her tweets and her posts show me that she doesn't have a clue. She's very out of touch. She sits from a position of privilege and types out nonsense, ignorant nonsense, directed towards people who are actually fighting to preserve the female category, people who are actually fighting for little girls who don't want to have championships taken away from them, who don't want to have medals taken away from them. Championships and medals and accolades that they work very hard for. People who are fighting for women who don't want to have to see a penis in their locker room when they're undressing to change into their swimsuit. They don't want to have to see a naked man in their locker room. People who are standing up for girls who don't want their tennis coach, a grown man, in their locker room undressing and watching them undress. That's exactly what has been allowed in the name of inclusion, in the name of gender ideology. Girls have been subjected to abuse, to SA, as a result of you wanting to be inclusive. Once you say that a boy or a man can compete against women and girls, or can enter into the bathroom because of their identity, you've opened the door to any man, to any boy, regardless of their intention, to be in the women's locker room and to compete in sports, putting female athletes in danger. That's what Simone Biles, one of the most prolific female athletes of our time, is advocating for right now. And insulting fellow female athletes. When if you look at the images that came out from the whole Leah Thomas situation, people would think it was a parody. 6'4" man towering over the female athletes, including Riley. I mean, I don't even know what Simone Biles is talking about. Your own size. But to compare her to a man makes no sense whatsoever. Makes no sense. So let's go through some of the response. And I'm telling you, it's good. Get your popcorn ready. Riley Gaines herself said the following: "This is so disappointing. My take is the least controversial take on the planet. Simone Biles, being a male apologist at the expense of young girls' dreams, didn't have that on my bingo card. Maybe she could compete in pommel horse and rings in 2028, something only male gymnasts do." Notice in Simone Biles' sport, they recognise the differences between the males and the females. But if a man decided he wanted to identify as a woman, he could compete in her category, in Simone Biles' category, with all his strength that far exceeds that of the female gymnasts. Let's see how Simone Biles does in that situation. And I said that it's always the female athletes who have never competed against men, who have never been forced to compete against men, who take these sort of views. Yet they want to get a pat on the back for standing up for the trans community. They want a virtue signal and flex their wokeness to prove how much better they are than others who are simply standing up for what is right, who are simply more in touch with reality, I would say. Sage Steele: "Easy to say this at Simone Biles when you only had to compete against fellow women. Every one of your Olympic medals came competing against fellow women. Riley Gaines was not only forced to compete against a man, but forced to share a locker room with a man. That is sick. Shocked and disappointed that you would attack another woman who has done nothing but uplift other women. If you think it makes sense to create a league for trans people, go for it. Use that huge platform of yours. But to attack Riley for what she has done for little girls who want to be the next Simone Biles is sick. And the subtle hint at body shaming? Please, I'm 5'5". Ah, the left and their self-righteous bullying. Somehow it makes them a better person. It's getting old. Tearing down other women just to please men and their fetish isn't as progressive as you think. Your backward stereotyping and bullying isn't only disgusting, it's also just wrong. Ironically, if you wanted to bully someone your own size, you'll have to fight Dobby the Elf. This is so disappointing to see. Riley has done more for women's sports than you ever have. You fought for your own medals. Riley is fighting for other women and girls to receive theirs. The only bully here is you, Simone, bullying Riley and bullying countless girls and women who lose out to boys and men in their sports. Something you didn't have to deal with. Your amazing achievements are because of the existence of female sport. Think this one through. And that's exactly what the problem is. She didn't think it through. She thought that she was really doing something here. That people were going to tell her, yeah, you stand up to these bigots. Now, to be balanced, perhaps she was just thinking this is someone in high school, so I've got to stand up for this kid. That's how she saw it, perhaps. What Simone doesn't realize is not just about this one particular athlete. It's about what has been allowed in the name of inclusion. And this is an example of that. It's not even people who are claiming to be transgender anymore. It's male athletes who are slipping through the net and being considered female, using their identification. In this case, it was the parents who changed their own child's identification, who transitioned their child, subjecting their child to medications, convincing their child that they're in the wrong body, and making their child a lifelong patient. But these same people are putting their kids into girls' sports and have the ID to back it up. That's what's so concerning about this particular case. But what people are pointing out to Simone is when you say that a man who identifies as a woman or a boy who identifies as a woman can enter into the women's locker room, you are advocating for girls to be subjected to abuse. That's what girls end up being subjected to. The case in Pennsylvania, which I think is one of the most sickest stories I've ever heard, where a tennis coach was allowed into the girls' locker room to undress and to watch them undress. He was asking about their menstrual cycles, all these inappropriate questions. They're trapped in a locker room with this person who was supposed to be their coach. The school allowed it because of an ideology. Sporting bodies, they've written policies that allow that. All in the name of identity, all in the name of uplifting. Riley Gaines says, Simone Biles, when she had to endure a predatory man, versus Simone Biles when other girls have to endure predatory men. Remember, Riley Gaines and Paula Scallon have spoken about being in the locker room with Leah Thomas. This is a situation where everybody's undressing because this is swimming. The swimsuits took up to 20 minutes to put on. Turns out, on Instagram later on, a couple of years after, they find out that there's evidence that Leah Thomas and Leah's boyfriend regard it as a fetish to dress up as a woman, based on what was being posted.
Leah Thomas, who used to be Will Thomas, is now dating someone that used to be a man that's now a woman, and they consider themselves lesbians.
Very interesting dynamic. The things they practice actively are interesting. They cut off parts of their male parts, but left other parts. These testicles are in a jar.
Stop.
Men who are thrilled by the thought of themselves as a woman, which, by the way, that is not the same thing as actually thinking that you are one. That's the important point. Now, even if Leah Thomas actually believed that he is a woman, that wouldn't at all make him a woman. And so it wouldn't change much, or it shouldn't.
All this sort of satanic imagery as well that they were posting. Can you imagine how violated Riley Gaines and Paula Scallon, all the female athletes must have felt? Women are being subjected to being in the locker room with men who have autogynephilia. Not just grown women, but girls are being subjected to this as well. So this is what we're dealing with here. We're not simply dealing with, letting a kid play sports. Don't deny the opportunity for this kid to play sports, which is a straw man argument because no one is denying anybody an opportunity to play sports. We're simply saying play in the correct category.
I am also a survivor of sexual abuse, and I believe without a doubt that the circumstances that led to my abuse and allowed it to continue are directly the result of the fact that the organizations created by Congress to oversee and protect me as an athlete, USA Gymnastics, and the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee failed to do their jobs. I don't want another young gymnast, Olympic athlete, or any individual to experience the horror that I and hundreds of others have endured before, during, and continuing to this day in the week.
We can see the contrast, and that's why I say she didn't think this through, because this is exactly what Riley Gaines is fighting against, allowing this in the first place, a system that allows it. Riley Gaines was informed that her locker room was made unisex to accommodate Leah Thomas. The same way that Simone is giving that emotional testimony there, and my heart goes out to her for what she experienced. But the same way she gave that testimony, you will find countless testimonies of other female athletes saying something similar, describing what they went through as a result of gender ideology, as a result of sporting bodies and organizations allowing men into their locker rooms.
Let me be clear. I label this as sexual harassment because me and the 4 witnesses you heard from today and the hundreds of other 18 to 22-year-old college girls were not asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent to being exploited and exposed to a 6'4" fully naked man. Because you did nothing. That man walked into our women's locker room at your university and saw me undressed down to full nudity. I didn't even know he had access to our locker room until I heard a man's voice and turned around and saw him a few feet in front of me, naked, inches away from where I was simultaneously unclothed. You allowed college women to be traumatized and violated on your campus in this way. Why didn't you protect us?
I was talking with one of my teammates on the pole deck in front of the locker room door. I opened the locker room door and was about to turn around and walk into the locker room to change when I physically bumped into Thomas. I was shocked by his size. He was about 6'4" tall, and I was shocked that as he bumped into me, his male genitalia was touching my hand that was stuck between us as he was leaving the locker room. I couldn't even say sorry. I froze, and he just smiled at me and said sorry in a male voice. We did not even have a women's locker room for the NCAA Women's National Championships.
For Simone Biles and what those female gymnasts went through, it was a doctor who was put in a position of authority, he was put in a position of trust. With these phenomenal athletes, he used his position and the vulnerability of these female athletes to take advantage. He was given access to female athletes. Similarly, men are given access to female athletes because people have been convinced that they are the vulnerable ones, that this is the only way that they can participate in sports. And if they don't, they may take their lives.
These poor people are more likely to commit suicide, have anxiety and depression. And the way that people talk down to vulnerable communities is an issue.
And by doing that, we allow men who are there to take advantage. And that is what has happened. Angela Carini was called a sore loser because she's never been punched the way she was punched when competing against a male athlete. Riley Gaines is called a sore loser because she simply spoke about what she went through. Riley, your exclusionary attitude never belonged in sports in the first place. You arguing with Simone Biles, one of the GOATs, is so laughable to me. But hey, you did come in fourth, with or without a trans athlete. So your whining and complaining rings so hollow. From the mother of a teen who had her girls' volleyball team lose to a team with a biological male on their team, Thank you. It's tragic that after your phenomenal achievements and inspiring millions of girls, you become a sellout for men who claim to be us. Why didn't you support Rachel Denhollander and Jamie Dance-Shear when they first spoke out about Nazir? Loving that by trying to insult Riley, Simone reinforces that men and women are so distinct that they should be separate categories.
So Simone Biles, who succeeded in gymnastics because of rules like Title IX, is mad at Riley Gaines for protecting Title IX. And this is the same person who was assaulted by a male in her sport, but is totally okay and is advocating for men to dress as women and go into their sports in locker rooms and bathrooms. And then goes on to essentially body shame Riley, who is 5'5", by the way, when she's 4'8". She's a literal hobbit and is trying to say that Riley should bully men because men are her size. If that's the case, I'm 5'9". What the heck am I supposed to bully? I would say Harry Sisson, but he's probably like 5'6". And I'd also just like to point out that Simone would never be in this position if men were competing in her sport. She would never have all these gold medals and be as successful if men were competing in women's gymnastics. And the only reason we don't see trans women competing in women's gymnastics is because if they fell on the beam, it would hit them where it hurt. And I would be so embarrassed to be her future daughters, knowing that your mother was the person who actively fought to take away your opportunities and your rights in women's athletics, to take away your ability to have podium spots and awards, to win scholarships, to win competitions, to change in a locker room without men being in there. And you mentioned having a third category for transgenders. That is just not possible for a couple reasons. First of all, women's sports are already struggling to find financials and to find people to even watch them to begin with. So why would we create a third category that wouldn't be able to function? And two, creating a third category for transgenders is feeding into delusions. And it's just another category for men to win. We're even seeing with the Boston Marathon, the men's category, women's category, and they have a third category for like gender fluid or something stupid like that. That's 3 categories for men to win.
But it's just disappointing, and I see it as somebody who simply is clueless. She hasn't done her homework. She's just jumping on the bandwagon. You know, I'm defending the trans community. This isn't about one particular athlete. This is about what has been going on for years and the abuse that girls and women have been through, often at times where they have received no compassion, no consideration. They've even been told that they should shut up about what they went through. And that's essentially what Simone is telling Riley to do. Dismissing what she went through and putting it down to her losing a race and being a sore loser. I always say people don't realize what they're advocating for. At the core of it, you are advocating for children to be put on medications that they can't even consent to be physically and chemically castrated. When you actually look into what you're advocating for, it's horrific. And it's the same with women's sports and women's spaces. When you think you're standing up for trans kids or whatever, or trans athletes, what you're advocating for is forcing girls to be put in situations that is against their consent and to be open and left without protection. And you're advocating for predators to be given access to women and girls. She was better off being those athletes that just keep quiet and don't say anything. But wouldn't it be nice if these high-profile athletes, who many women and girls look up to, actually stood up for women and girls and said, this is wrong, instead of telling these girls that they're sore losers. So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.